A low, grinding shudder vibrates through 1,500 feet of steel. April 14, 1912, 11:40 p.m. In the crow's nest, high above the Atlantic, Frederick Fleet's breath catches as a white mass looms from the darkness, impossibly large, impossibly close. His hand slams the warning bell 3 times. He grabs the telephone. "Iceberg, right ahead!" Fleet is scanning for icebergs with his naked eyes. No binoculars. They're locked in a cabinet below deck, and the only man with the key isn't even on the ship anymore. On the bridge, First Officer William Murdoch has 37 seconds to save 2,200 lives. Hard a starboard, full astern. The bow swings left. The iceberg passes along the starboard side. For a moment, they've made it. Then comes the impact. Not an explosion, but a whisper. A grinding shudder most passengers barely notice. Chunks of ice scatter across the deck. Third-class passengers kick them around, laughing. They have no idea that in 2 hours and 40 minutes, 1,500 of them will be dead. But to understand why 1,500 people died that night, you need to go back 2 weeks, to a fire that White Star Line tried to hide from the world. April 2nd, 1912, Southampton. The Titanic sits at dock, preparing for her maiden voyage. The press calls her unsinkable. Photographers swarm. First-class passengers arrive in motor cars. And deep inside the ship, in coal bunker number 6, a fire is burning. It started 10 days ago, before the ship even left Belfast. Temperature, 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The crew knows. The officers know. White Star Line management knows. Nobody tells the passengers. Coal fires weren't uncommon, but this one was different. It was burning right against the starboard hull, exactly where the ship would later hit the iceberg. For 10 days, stokers worked in brutal heat trying to contain it, shoveling burning coal into the furnaces, trying to empty the bunker. The fire weakened the steel bulkhead between the 5th and 6th watertight compartments. That's where the iceberg would tear the hull open. In 2017, journalist Sinan Malini discovered a photograph taken by ship's engineer Steve Rayside. It shows a dark streak on Titanic's starboard hull, about 30 feet long, scorch marks. When the ship docked in Southampton, they positioned her with the damaged side facing away from the pier. They didn't want passengers seeing that black scar. Think about that. The unsinkable ship left port with a compromised hull and an active fire burning inside. And the omens started immediately. April 10th, 1912, 12:15 p.m. The Titanic's engines roar to life. Crowds wave from the docks. The largest moving object ever built by human hands begins to move. Then physics takes over. The displacement from Titanic's massive hull creates a surge wave that slams into a nearby ship, the SS New York. The wave snaps the New York's mooring ropes like thread. 7 steel cables, each thick as a man's arm, explode with sounds like gunshots. The New York swings out, drifting directly toward Titanic's hull. Collision in 60 seconds. Captain Smith orders full astern. The propellers churn in reverse. The New York drifts closer, 50 feet, 30 feet, 20. A tugboat manages to get a line on her. The ships pass with less than 10 feet of clearance. Departure is delayed by an hour. On deck, passengers murmur nervously. Many are superstitious. They see this as a sign. Some want to leave. The crew laughs it off. Just bad luck. The Titanic is unsinkable. Everyone says so. But here's what makes the story darker. The man who built that reputation, who pushed the unsinkable narrative hardest, who had every reason to know better, he was on board. And 3 weeks later, while 1,500 people drowned in the North Atlantic, J. Bruce Ismay would be sitting in a lifeboat, very much alive. The Titanic was built for one purpose: humiliation. White Star Line owner J. Bruce Ismay wanted to crush his rivals at Cunard. 882 feet long, 46,000 tons, grand staircases, Turkish baths, a swimming pool. First-class suites cost $4,350, $124,000 today. John Jacob Astor was aboard. Benjamin Guggenheim, Isidore and Ida Strauss, owners of Macy's. The richest people in the world, crossing the ocean in a floating palace. The press called it unsinkable. 16 watertight compartments, doors that could seal in seconds. The ship could survive 4 compartments flooded, maybe 5. What they didn't mention, chief designer Thomas Andrews knew it could never survive 6. But marketing doesn't care about engineering. God himself could not sink this ship, one deckhand supposedly said. Andrews never made that claim. He knew exactly how fragile his creation was. That's why he was on board, to observe, to take notes, to fix the inevitable problems. And in 4 days, he'd watch his masterpiece die, knowing he couldn't save it. Here's what makes it criminal. They didn't have enough lifeboats, 20 boats total, capacity for 1,178 people. There were 2,200 aboard. British regulations were outdated, based on tonnage from decades earlier. Titanic technically exceeded requirements. But Ismay had another reason. Lifeboats cluttered the deck. They blocked the view. They reminded first-class passengers of mortality. More than 1,000 people were condemned before the ship left Southampton. And here's the detail that'll make you angry. White Star Line had originally planned for 64 lifeboats. Harland and Wolff, the shipbuilder, had designed davits strong enough to hold them. Then Ismay looked at the deck plans and said no. Too crowded. Ruins the aesthetic. He cut it down to 20. Think about that. The davits, the metal arms that lower the lifeboats, were built to save everyone. The boats just weren't there. Now, before we go further, you need to understand something about the ship you think sank that night. Because some investigators believe the Titanic never hit an iceberg at all. They believe it was a different ship. Her older, damaged sister, the Olympic, September 20th, 1911, 7 months before Titanic's maiden voyage. The RMS Olympic, Titanic's nearly identical sister ship, is leaving Southampton when the Royal Navy cruiser HMS Hawke suddenly turns and slams into her starboard side. The collision tears a massive hole in Olympic's hull. Both ships barely make it back to port. The Hawke's captain blames Olympic's massive displacement for creating suction that pulled his ship off course. The Royal Navy agrees. White Star Line's insurance claim is rejected. Here's where it gets interesting. Olympic and Titanic were being built simultaneously at Harland and Wolff's shipyard in Belfast, in side-by-side dry docks. Olympic was ship number 400. Titanic was 401. Nearly identical. After the collision, Olympic had to return to Belfast for repairs. Expensive repairs. Repairs that would take months. Repairs that insurance wouldn't cover. Meanwhile, Titanic sat nearly complete in the next dock over. The theory goes like this. White Star Line was hemorrhaging money. Olympic was damaged. Titanic was pristine. So they switched them. They repainted the names, swapped a few external features, and sent the damaged Olympic out as Titanic, with a plan to sink her and collect $12.5 million in insurance money. The evidence that believers point to, photographs of Titanic at launch show 14 portholes on the forward sea deck. Photographs taken in Southampton before departure show 16. The ships were supposed to be identical, but subtle differences existed, and some of those differences appeared to swap between ships. Survivors reported seeing different propeller configurations than Titanic specifications called for. And then there's the most compelling detail: the cancellations. J.P. Morgan owned the International Mercantile Marine Company, which owned White Star Line. He'd booked passage on Titanic's maiden voyage. At the last minute, he canceled, citing illness. Days later, journalists found him in France with his mistress, perfectly healthy. Morgan wasn't alone. Approximately 55 passengers canceled their bookings in the final days before departure. Milton Hershey canceled. Guglielmo Marconi, inventor of the wireless radio, canceled. Henry Clay Frick canceled. All of them titans of industry, all with convenient excuses. Coincidence? Maybe. But think about the timing. Think about the money involved. Think about the fact that the man who owned the shipping line, who stood to collect millions in insurance, who just watched his flagship get rejected for insurance payout, that man suddenly decided not to sail on the unsinkable ship's maiden voyage. The theory spread for decades, books were written, documentaries produced. But we'll get back to this later, because in 1985, someone went down to check, and what they found on the ocean floor changes everything. First, let's talk about what went wrong above the surface. Because everything I've told you so far, the fire, the cheap construction, the missing binoculars, the canceled tickets, all of it converges on one night. And on that night, every single safety system failed. Captain Edward John Smith was 62, making his final voyage before retirement. He was White Star Line's most senior captain, a company man through and through, beloved by wealthy passengers for his charm and social skills. On April 14th, as Titanic steamed through the North Atlantic at 22.5 knots, near maximum speed, Smith received 6 separate warnings about icebergs in his path. At 1:42 p.m., the Baltic reported ice. At 1:45 p.m., the America confirmed it. At 7:30 p.m., the Californian warned of heavy ice directly ahead. At 9:40 p.m., the SS Mesaba sent an urgent message. Massive pack ice field directly in Titanic's path, coordinates included. That message never made it to the bridge. Wireless operator Jack Phillips was too busy sending passenger telegrams. Rich people needed to cable their stockbrokers, their dinner reservations, their mistresses. The Mesaba's warning sat undelivered. At 10:55 p.m., the SS Californian tried one last time. Her radio operator sent, "We are stopped and surrounded by ice." Phillips, overwhelmed and exhausted, snapped back, shut up, I'm busy." The Californian's operator, offended, shut down his wireless and went to bed. Remember the Californian. She'll matter again very soon. Captain Smith never slowed down. He was at a dinner party with first-class passengers, including J. Bruce Ismay, sipping wine, accepting compliments on his magnificent ship. The Titanic was unsinkable. Everyone said so. Why worry about ice? Meanwhile, in the crow's nest, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee stared into total darkness, searching for icebergs with their naked eyes. Here's the chain of failures that made that possible. The lookouts were supposed to have binoculars, standard equipment. The binoculars were stored in a locked cabinet. The key was held by Second Officer David Blair. But at the last minute, White Star Line reshuffled the officer roster. Blair was bumped off the ship to make room for Henry Wilde, who'd been transferred from the Olympic. Blair left the ship in Southampton. He forgot to hand over the key. Fleet and Lee repeatedly asked for binoculars. They were told to make do. For 5 days, they scanned the horizon with naked eyes. Fleet would later testify at the inquiry that with binoculars, he was confident he would have spotted the iceberg in time to avoid it completely. The key to that cabinet, the key that might have saved 1,500 lives, was sold at auction in 2007 for $137,000. The buyer called it the key to the Titanic disaster. He wasn't wrong. At 11:40 p.m., Fleet saw a black shape against the stars. No white foam at the base, no moonlight to illuminate it, just a void where stars should be. By the time he rang the bell, collision was inevitable. The impact tore punctures and separated hull plates across 6 compartments. Water poured in at 7 tons per second. Down in the boiler rooms, stokers screamed as freezing seawater exploded through the hull, made worse by the weakened bulkhead where the coal fire had burned for 10 days. The fire hadn't caused the sinking, but it had compromised the exact section of hull that now faced catastrophic flooding. Thomas Andrews ran through the ship with blueprints, checking damage. His face went white. He found Captain Smith. "She's going to sink. You have an hour, maybe 2. And here's where the Titanic becomes something worse than a disaster. It becomes a crime scene. Because what happened over the next 2 hours wasn't just chaos, it was a system designed to save the rich and sacrifice the poor. At midnight, Smith gave the order to uncover the lifeboats. But passengers didn't believe it. The ship felt stable. Many went back to their rooms. The band played ragtime. First-class passengers stood around looking annoyed, like this was a tedious fire drill. The first lifeboat launched at 12:45 a.m. Capacity, 65. Actual occupants, 28. Officers were afraid full boats would buckle. They planned to fill them from the water later. It never happened. Lifeboat after lifeboat left half empty. Lifeboat 1, capacity 40, left with 12 people. Meanwhile, J. Bruce Ismay was on deck, urging women into boats, knowing something nobody else yet understood. He had cut the lifeboats from 64 to 20. He knew the math. He knew who was going to die. At the same time, the first distress rockets screamed into the sky. 10 miles away, officers on the SS Californian saw it. They saw rocket after rocket burst over the horizon for the next hour. They thought it was a party. Captain Stanley Lord was asleep. The wireless was off, because Phillips had told their operator to shut up 45 minutes earlier. Nobody woke Lord. The ship that could have saved hundreds sat motionless on a calm sea, watching fireworks, doing nothing. After the disaster, the British Inquiry made Lord their scapegoat. He spent the rest of his life trying to clear his name. But the men who actually built the death trap, Ismay, the White Star Board, settled lawsuits for $664,000 and moved on. While first-class passengers hesitated in the cold, third-class passengers fought for their lives behind locked gates. The gates were immigration barriers required by U.S. law. When the ship began sinking, many stayed locked. Some stewards opened them. Others didn't know where the keys were. Language barriers made it worse. Most third-class passengers spoke Italian, Swedish, Russian, Finnish, Arabic, Chinese. By the time many reached the boat deck, the lifeboats were gone. The numbers tell you everything. 97% of first-class women survived. 46% of third-class women. 100% of first-class children survived. 34% of third-class children died. Money didn't just buy you a ticket, it bought you a life. At 2:05 a.m., the bow was completely underwater. The stern rose at an impossible angle. At 2:17 a.m., the lights went out. A sound like artillery fire, steel tearing, rivets exploding. The Titanic broke in half. The bow plunged into the abyss. The stern hung vertical for a moment, a 400-foot monument to arrogance, then slid beneath the surface. 1,500 people hit 28-degree water. Hypothermia kills in 15 minutes. The screaming could be heard for miles, a chorus that survivors would hear in nightmares for the rest of their lives. Lifeboats rowed away, terrified of being swamped. Only 5th Officer Harold Lowe went back. He pulled 4 living people from a sea of corpses. 4 out of 1,500. At 2:20 a.m., silence. Some of the dead were heroes. Isidore and Ida Strauss refused a lifeboat. "We have lived together for many years," Ida said. "Where you go, I go." They died holding hands. Benjamin Guggenheim changed into evening wear. "We've dressed in our best and are prepared to go down like gentlemen." Thomas Andrews was last seen staring at a painting in the smoking room, his life jacket given away. And Ismay, the man who cut the lifeboats? He climbed into collapsible sea at 1:40 a.m. Women and children were still on board. He survived. He lived another 25 years in shame and seclusion. But he lived. At 4:10 a.m., the Carpathia arrived. Captain Arthur Rostron had pushed his ship past her maximum speed, risking his own vessel to race through ice fields in the dark. She picked up 710 survivors. That was all. Now let's go back to the ocean floor, because I promised you the truth about whether this was really the Titanic. In 1985, oceanographer Robert Ballard found the wreck, 12,500 feet down, sitting upright, bow and stern separated by nearly 2,000 feet of debris. The ship had broken in half exactly like survivors described, though the official inquiry had called them hysterical liars. Ballard vindicated them. But more importantly, Ballard's discovery destroyed the Olympic switch theory. Hull number 401, Titanic's number, not Olympic's 400, was stamped on multiple components. Propellers had Titanic's unique serial numbers. High-resolution sonar revealed room configurations matching Titanic's layouts. The rivet patterns matched Titanic's newer technique. Recovered dishes, fixtures, and metalwork all bore Titanic's inventory marks. Every single piece of evidence confirmed this was Titanic. And thousands of workers at Harland and Wolff would have had to participate in the switch silently. Riveters, plumbers, electricians, men who knew every inch of both ships. Not one ever talked. Plus, Thomas Andrews was on board. The man who designed both ships wouldn't participate in insurance fraud that required his own death. But Ballard also found something else. Metallurgical tests on recovered hull fragments revealed that Harland and Wolff had used cheap wrought iron rivets with high slag content on the forward hull sections instead of steel. Why? Speed and cost. Steel rivets required specialized workers and more time. The shipyard was under pressure to finish on schedule, so they used iron rivets in the bow, exactly where the iceberg struck. In cold water, quality steel rivets bend and absorb impact. These cheap iron rivets became brittle. When the iceberg scraped along the hull, the rivets didn't bend. They shattered like champagne corks popping from their holes. The iceberg didn't slice the ship open. It rattled the hull plates, the rivets exploded, and water poured through the gaps. If they'd used steel rivets throughout, which they easily could have afforded on the most expensive ship ever built, the damage would have been far less. Maybe 2 compartments flooded instead of 6. Maybe the ship limps to New York. Maybe everyone lives. But that would have cost more money, taken more time. And Ismay wanted headlines. The wreck is disappearing. A unique species of bacteria, Halomonas titanici, is consuming the iron, creating delicate rust formations called rusticles that hang from the hull like stalactites. Scientists estimate that by 2030, maybe sooner, the wreck will collapse entirely into sediment. And in 2023, the wreck claimed 5 more lives. OceanGate, a private deep-sea company, built a submersible called Titan to take paying customers down to see the Titanic. On June 18th, during a dive, the Titan imploded at depth, killing all 5 aboard instantly. Among them, Paul-Henri Nargeolet, a veteran Titanic explorer who dived to the wreck dozens of times. The parallels are chilling. warnings ignored, cost-cutting on safety. A CEO who believed his vehicle was invincible. He'd literally said regulations were stifling innovation. Experts had raised alarms about the experimental carbon fiber hull. OceanGate dismissed them. 5 people died visiting the grave of 1,500 who died the same way, because someone decided safety was negotiable. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. So here's the verdict. Let's go through each theory. The Olympic switch theory, debunked. The wreck's hull numbers, propeller serial numbers, rivet patterns, and room configurations all match. Titanic's specifications. The physical evidence is overwhelming. They didn't switch the ships. Insurance fraud by White Star Line. Unproven, but suspicious. Morgan and 55 others canceled at the last minute. Morgan owned the company that collected the payout, but there's no documentation, no whistleblowers, no smoking gun. We'll never know for certain. The coal bunker fire, confirmed. Photographs prove it. The fire burned for 10 days, weakening the bulkhead exactly where the iceberg struck. It didn't cause the sinking, but it made the damage worse. White Star Line knew and sailed anyway. Substandard rivets and materials, proven. Metallurgical analysis confirmed cheap iron rivets with high slag content in the bow. In cold water, they shattered instead of bending. Cost-cutting, pure and simple. Criminal negligence and greed, absolutely confirmed. Lifeboats cut from 64 to 20. 6 ice warnings ignored. Near maximum speed through a moonless night. No binoculars. A fire burning in the hull. Every failure was preventable. Every death was avoidable. There was no grand conspiracy. No evil mastermind. Just a cascade of human choices, each one small, each one justified in the moment. Someone ignored a warning to send a telegram. Someone forgot a key. Someone chose cheaper rivets to meet a deadline. Someone cut lifeboats to improve the view. 1,517 people died. 710 survived, most traumatized for life. The last survivor, Milvina Dean, died in 2009 at 97. She was 2 months old when the ship sank, traveling in 3rd class with her mother and brother. Her father drowned. "I don't remember any of it," she said, "but it remembered me my whole life." The wreck is disappearing. By 2030, Titanic may be gone, dissolved into rust and memory. The ship that was supposed to be unsinkable will become nothing but sediment on the ocean floor. We're obsessed with Titanic because it's the perfect tragedy. Hubris, class warfare, technology versus nature. But we keep searching for conspiracies because the banal truth is harder to accept. No villain, no mastermind, just human choices. Someone ignored a warning, someone cut a corner, someone chose profit over safety, and 1,500 people paid the price. The Titanic wasn't sunk by an iceberg. It was sunk by the belief that some ships, and some people, are too big to fail. 2,000 feet above the wreck, on the surface of a dark and indifferent ocean, one question remains. Are we listening?